The dream was simple, elegant, almost mathematical in its certainty. A steady job, a modest salary, a house with a lawn out front and a kitchen filled with light. In the post-war decades, this wasn't fantasy. It was policy, a system designed to manufacture stability. One income could buy not just shelter, but identity. Ownership meant control. It meant permanence. It meant you had made it. But cut the film. Because today, that same house is no longer a milestone. It's a battleground. Open houses overflow with people who all know the same truth. There aren't enough homes, and whatever is left is slipping out of reach. Offers stack within hours. Bids jump tens of thousands above asking. Salaries crawl, but prices sprint. And somewhere in the background, there's a quiet, suffocating realization. You're not just losing. You were never meant to win. Because when you lose a home today, you're rarely losing to another family. You're losing to something else. Something faster, colder, automated. Wall Street and massive institutional investors didn't just enter the housing market, they rewrote its rules. Private equity firms armed with billions in liquid capital deploy algorithms that scan, evaluate, and outbid in milliseconds. Entire neighborhoods are no longer communities. They're portfolios, rows of houses reduced to lines on a balance sheet. To them, your future home isn't a home. It's yield. And here's the part no one tells you. They don't want to sell the homes back. Selling is inefficient, temporary. Renting is forever. Because if they own the house, they own the payment. Every month, for life. Shelter, the most basic human need, transformed into a subscription service. One you can never cancel. This isn't a housing shortage. It's a transfer of ownership. And once you see the system, you can't unsee it. Welcome to The Blueprint. It didn't begin with innovation. It began with collapse. In 2008, the global financial system cracked under the weight of its own design. Subprime mortgages, packaged, sold, and resold by Wall Street, imploded. Credit froze. Markets spiraled. And across America, millions of families were pushed out of their homes. Foreclosure wasn't an exception. It was a wave. Entire neighborhoods emptied almost overnight. Lawns went uncut. Windows went dark. The middle class wasn't just losing wealth. It was losing its foundation. But while families were drowning, someone else was taking notes. To Wall Street, this wasn't just a crisis. It was inventory. For decades, institutional investors had ignored single-family homes. Too fragmented, too operationally messy. You couldn't scale them like office buildings or apartment towers. But now, suddenly, the chaos had created something new. A flooded market of distressed properties priced far below their intrinsic value. What once looked like a logistical nightmare now looked like a once-in-a-generation arbitrage opportunity. And then came the predators. Private equity firms, armed with billions in liquid capital, moved with precision. Blackstone led the charge, launching entities like Invitation Homes to execute at scale. They didn't browse listings like ordinary buyers. They went straight to the source: courthouse steps, foreclosure auctions, distressed asset pipelines. Hundreds of homes, sometimes entire blocks, purchased in a single day. Sight unseen. No emotion, no hesitation, just volume. And this is where the game changed. Because Wall Street didn't just buy houses, it redefined them. Scattered suburban homes were aggregated, standardized, and transformed into a new financial instrument. Single-family rentals, SFR. Thousands of individual properties bundled into centralized portfolios. Predictable cash flows, scalable rent streams, tradable, securitized, optimized. What used to be a neighborhood became a yield curve. A community became an asset class. For a normal family, buying a home is not a transaction. It's a decade-long campaign. Years of saving, cutting expenses, delaying everything else. Then the paperwork begins. Bank statements, credit checks, pre-approvals. A fragile green light from the lender that says, "You're allowed to try." They walk through open houses not just with their eyes, but with their future, where the crib might go. where birthdays will happen. And behind every decision sits the quiet gravity of a 30-year mortgage, 3 decades of commitment, risk, and hope tied to a single address. Now cut the emotion, because on the other side of the same listing, there is no family. There is a machine. Private equity firms don't browse homes, they scrape them. The moment a property appears on platforms like Zillow or Redfin, proprietary algorithms ingest the data instantly. Price history, neighborhood trends, rental demand, tax records. In seconds, the house is no longer a home, it's a dataset. Evaluated, scored, and ranked without ever opening the front door. And then comes the weapon, cash. No bank approvals, no contingencies, no waiting. The algorithm calculates the maximum rental yield. Before a family even has time to schedule a viewing, a corporate offer is already on the table. All cash. Often 10, even 20% above asking price. Inspections waived. Risk eliminated. Speed weaponized. Against that kind of force, a family with a mortgage isn't competing. They're obsolete. So the obvious question is, why would they overpay? Because they're not buying a home. They're buying a system. An extra $30,000 today is irrelevant when the objective is decades of rent, rising with inflation, backed by a tangible asset that never stops producing. This isn't about winning one house. It's about owning entire markets, controlling supply, setting price floors. It's monopoly at a macroeconomic scale. And the middle class, they're not losing the game. They were never given a seat at the table. There's a comforting myth people still cling to, that these firms are just flipping houses, buying low, selling high, moving on. That would imply an exit, but they aren't flipping houses back to the middle class. When they do sell, they trade in bulk, swapping entire neighborhoods with other massive funds. The properties stay locked inside a corporate loop, permanently extracted from the public supply. Every home acquired is one less home available to buy, permanently extracted from supply, locked inside portfolios designed not for turnover, but for control. The longer they hold, the tighter the market becomes. And the tighter the market becomes, the more power they gain. And once the supply is controlled, the model changes. You already live in a subscription economy. You pay monthly for Netflix. You pay monthly for Spotify. Access replaces ownership. Convenience replaces control. Now apply that same logic to shelter. Housing as a service. A recurring charge for the right to exist in a space you will never own. The house is no longer a destination. It's a login. A permission granted and revoked by whoever owns the system. And like any subscription model, the objective is simple. Maximize lifetime value. Corporate landlords don't negotiate. They optimize. Using algorithmic pricing software like RealPage, rents are calibrated continuously, pushed to the absolute maximum each market can tolerate. No sentiment, no loyalty, just data. If the market can bear another 3%, it will take 3%. If it can bear 10%, it will take 10. This isn't rent, it's extraction. And this is the endgame. A generation that will never cross the threshold into ownership. Because ownership is where wealth is built. Equity compounds, stability forms, futures are secured. But rent? Rent is a one-way transaction. Every payment leaves you with nothing and enriches someone else. Not a neighbor, not a local landlord, but a distant portfolio, engineered to harvest cash flow at scale. You don't build equity, you fund dividends. And in this system, you don't own your home. You don't even rent it. You subscribe to it. So here's the truth, stripped of nostalgia, stripped of illusion. The American dream didn't fade away. It was acquired, not by accident, not by inevitability, but by design. The same institutions that once destabilized the housing market returned with better tools, deeper capital, and zero intention of giving it back. The middle class didn't suddenly become irresponsible. It didn't forget how to save. It didn't stop working hard. It got outbid by algorithms that don't sleep, by capital that doesn't hesitate, by a system that no longer sees homes as places to live, but as instruments to own. And what replaces it is something far more calculated, an extraction economy. Because building something new is difficult. It requires risk, innovation, time. But buying what already exists and charging people for access to it, that's predictable, scalable, defensible. We're watching a systemic shift from ownership to access, from creation to control, from earning value to extracting it. A house becomes a subscription. A necessity becomes a revenue stream. And slowly, quietly, the rules of the game change until one sentence begins to feel less like a warning and more like a business model. You will own nothing, and you will pay for everything. And here's the part most people miss. Housing isn't the exception, it's the blueprint. Because Wall Street isn't the only player that figured this out. If turning your physical home into a subscription feels unsettling, wait until you see what happens when the same strategy is applied to your digital life. Because one company has already perfected it. Tim Cook didn't just build products, he built an ecosystem, a closed loop, a system where leaving is harder than staying, and paying is perpetual. To see how Apple engineered the world's most expensive, inescapable digital prison, watch the full breakdown right here.